They laughed because they thought you were behind. Now they're panicking because you never told them you were building in silence. Now imagine this for a moment, chosen one. You're a vault. No noise, no leaks, no previews, just presence. One day you were silent in the shadows. No clout, no crowd, no chaos. And then, boom, you show up with receipts, results, and a glow that can't be copied. People are staring like they just missed an entire season of your life. That's not magic. That's mastery. That's strategy they never saw coming. And here's the hard truth. The universe doesn't bless noise, it blesses alignment. While they were performing for approval, you were building for legacy. You didn't ask for a seat at their table, you built your own. And now they're choking on their pride, trying to figure out how you made it without them. Here's a fact for you, chosen one. Most people aren't confused by your success. They're offended by your silence, because in their world, success is loud, fake, bought, or borrowed. But yours came from quiet consistency, from sacrifice they didn't see, from faith they never understood, and from a patience that exposed their addiction to shortcuts. And thank you, chosen one. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing the like and subscribe to help spread this message to more souls. It's the responsibility of all of us to spread the light. And thank you, chosen one, for being part of this mission. You are part of a force, an unseen, unstoppable force that changes everything it touches. Let's talk about what's really happening right now. People are trying to figure you out because they never imagined someone like you could survive the storm they thought would break you. They watched you walk through fire and expected ashes. But instead, they're watching you rise with clean hands, clear eyes, and a power they can't track. What you just pulled off doesn't make sense to them because they've never moved in silence, never walked in truth, and never trusted the universe over trends. You're the anomaly, the glitch in their expectations. They had you boxed in, quiet, overlooked, underestimated. They thought you were too sensitive, too kind, too small to play the big game. What they didn't know is that quiet people carry the loudest truth. Sensitive people have the strongest discernment. And the ones they ignore, those are the ones who flip the script entirely. Your rise didn't come from luck. It came from discipline, from knowing when to speak and when to vanish, from understanding that private growth beats public performance. And that's why they can't figure you out. Because they only know how to chase attention. You mastered how to attract energy. You're not showing off, you're showing up. And the difference is spiritual, untraceable, untouchable. They want the blueprint, but they can't handle the silence. They want the outcome, but not the evolution. Because your glow isn't from filters, it's from fire, from breaking and rebuilding in secret, from aligning with something the world can't measure, but deeply feels. And that's why they're whispering, lurking, decoding, but still confused. Let them wonder. Let them scroll through your life like it's a case study. Let them compare, copy, mimic, because what you have can't be duplicated. It's not a trend. It's a frequency, and only those who faced the darkness and chose light will ever recognize it. So don't shrink, don't explain, don't try to make sense to people still performing for claps. You didn't pull this off by chance, you pulled it off by truth. And now, every step you take becomes another unsolvable riddle to the ones who only knew how to fake strength. Let them look, let them guess, let them spiral. Because the mystery they can't solve is the masterpiece you've become. Let's get into why this is happening and why you, chosen one, have become the very force they underestimated. So, Are you ready to find out why they can't stop watching your every move? Why your glow has them confused, obsessed, and low-key inspired, but too proud to admit it? Drop the number 777 in the comments. If you've ever felt people studying you like you're a mystery they can't crack, and if this message is already hitting something deep, bless the mission with a super thanks. Whether it's a word, a dollar, or a share, it all helps fuel this light we're spreading. You're not just watching, you're part of the reason this message is moving through the world. And now, let's break it down step by step. And believe me, if you're truly the chosen one they tried to overlook, you'll feel the pull to stay till the very end. Let's get into it. Number 1. They can't crack the code because you were never playing their game. They laughed at you in silence, now they study you in silence. The same mouths that doubted you are now biting their tongues, trying to figure out how you pulled it off without ever playing by their rules. They're glued to your story like it's a documentary that doesn't add up. They're whispering in circles, rewinding scenes of your life, dissecting your choices like forensic analysts trying to solve a crime. But here's the twist. You didn't break any law. They just never imagined someone like you could break the system. The truth is, they're not watching because they're proud. They're watching because they're pressed. Because what you did, it shattered everything they thought they knew about how to win. Now imagine this for a moment. Chosen one, you're like a silent code that suddenly disrupted the entire simulation. They were so confident in their formula, clout plus connections equals success, lies plus masks plus manipulation equals power. That was their world. That was their blueprint. Then you came along, no noise, no masks, no alliances. You moved through the fog like a ghost, untouched by trends, unmoved by attention. And then you appeared glowing, crowned, victorious, not because of them, in spite of them. They're not used to people like you. You didn't come from their circle. You didn't show up at the parties. You didn't suck up to the loudest voices in the room. You didn't post your struggle for sympathy. You kept it real. You kept it raw. You walked through the fire without asking for applause. And now they're scrambling to rewrite their rules because you proved them all wrong. They said you needed to network to be seen. You got noticed by being authentic. They said you had to perform to be liked. You got respected by being unavailable. They said you needed help. You became the help. You didn't fit into their algorithm, so now they think you hacked the system. And here's the most painful truth they can't swallow. You never betrayed yourself to win. They did. They traded their peace for clout, their truth for likes, their integrity for validation. And after all that selling out, all that posing, they're still confused about how you, the one they didn't even count, crossed the finish line first. They thought you were too quiet, too sensitive, too unknown, too real. What they failed to realize is that real ones don't need to announce their arrival. They move in silence and show up with results. That's what you did. You didn't beg to be included. You just built your own table. And now they're showing up with questions they don't deserve the answers to. Wait, how did they do it? Who backed them? Who put them on? That's the question echoing in their insecure minds. But the answer? Nobody. The universe, the grind, the resilience, the consistency, that's who backed you. They had group chats, you had vision, they had clicks, you had clarity, they had attention, you had alignment, and now they can't sleep. Not because you stole their spotlight, but because you became the light and didn't need their approval to shine. Your presence now disturbs them, not because you're loud, but because you're solid. And silence mixed with results is the loudest scream they can't ignore. They built their identity on being seen. You built yours on being whole. They bought their followers. You earned your respect. They curated an image. You cultivated a soul. And now, every step you take, every post, every room you enter, every new level you unlock, reminds them that they chose the shortcut, and it still couldn't outrun your purpose. They wanted you to stay hidden. They told people you wouldn't make it. They used your absence to talk down on your name. But now they're refreshing your page like it's gospel. Now they're showing your moves to others like, look at this. Not in admiration, but in disbelief, because in their eyes, you weren't supposed to make it. They wanted you to stay stuck in your past, but you turned your past into power. They wanted you to stay lost, but you mapped your way to something greater. They wanted you to need them, but you mastered needing no one but the truth. So let them watch. Let them rewind, let them spiral, let them break their minds, trying to break your method down. They won't find the answer, because what moved you can't be taught in workshops. What shaped you can't be copied from a PDF. What birthed this version of you came from pain, patience, and purpose, and they don't know the first thing about that. You're not just a mystery, you're a mirror. Every time they try to decode you, they're confronted with their own shortcuts, insecurities, and shallow wins. That's why they flinch. That's why they whisper. That's why they're obsessed. Because your glow exposed their shadows. Your calm exposed their noise. Your rise exposed their rot. This wasn't luck. It was legacy. It was earned in silence, crafted in isolation, sealed with self-respect. And now, the same people who treated you like an afterthought are treating your story like a case study. The same ones who wrote you off are writing notes trying to catch up. And the best part? You didn't do it to prove anything. You did it because you refused to lose yourself. You did it because you knew your value wasn't up for debate. You did it because the universe doesn't miss. And now, every time they try to figure you out, they come face to face with a brutal truth they can't unsee. You were never playing their game. You were building your own. And now, game over. You won. And they're stuck trying to understand how, when they never even tried to understand you. Number 1, they're stuck in loops. You turned pain into leverage, and that's why they can't keep up. You were handed pain and turned it into power. They were handed pain and turned it into poison. That's the difference, and they know it. Imagine this for a moment, chosen one. 2 people go through fire, same heat, same loss, same betrayal. But one walks out stronger, clearer, and more alive than ever. The other, still coughing up smoke, blaming the fire for what they refuse to learn inside it. That's what separates you from them. You didn't just go through the storm, you let the storm rebuild you. They went through it and let it rot their soul. You pulled this off because you made pain your professor, not your prison. Every wound, every heartbreak, every silence you had to survive taught you something. You didn't flinch from it. You didn't drown in it. You studied it. You stared it in the eye and said, "You're not taking me out. You're teaching me who I really am." They don't get it, and they never will. Because while you were doing inner work in the shadows, they were throwing tantrums in the spotlight. While you were healing, they were hiding. While you were asking, "What can I learn from this?" they were crying, "Why me?" And now they want the shine without the shadow work. They want your strength, but not your scars. They want the crown without walking barefoot through the glass that shaped it. Pain reveals character, but only to those willing to face the mirror without flinching. They keep asking, "How are you still standing after all that? How are you still soft? How are you still kind?" How are you still open when people ripped you apart? And the answer is simple, but it terrifies them. You chose not to become like the people who hurt you. You could have become bitter. You could have become cold. You could have become cruel, but you didn't. Because some part of you knew, deep down, that the world didn't need another broken, angry soul playing victim in disguise. It needed someone to break the pattern, and that someone was you. They let pain shut their hearts. You let pain sharpen your vision. You didn't have fewer problems. You probably had more, and not the kind of pain that posts well, the kind that doesn't even have language, the betrayal that leaves you questioning your own reflection, the loss that doesn't even come with a funeral, the kind of emotional chaos that could have destroyed you quietly, but instead it built something sacred inside you. And now they see your peace and it makes them itch. They see your glow and it bothers their spirit, not because they hate you, but because you remind them of the version of themselves they were too afraid to become. You remind them of the growth they avoided, the healing they skipped, the depth they feared. And now they're stuck in a cycle of resentment while you've turned your past into wisdom. Bitterness is the comfort food of cowards. You chose truth and it tasted bitter, but it set you free. They're clapping for your light now, but they weren't there for the nights you wanted to disappear. They weren't there for the tears no one saw, for the nights you questioned your worth, for the mornings you got up with a cracked heart and still chose to be kind. That's the part they'll never understand. That's the process they'll never respect. They scroll through your victories like spectators, not realizing what it took behind the scenes, because they think this was a one-time glow-up, a stroke of luck, a fluke. But this was slow, sacred work. This was choosing to rebuild yourself with no blueprint. This was crying without witnesses and healing without applause. This was evolution in silence. Imagine this, chosen one. Two people fall from grace. One chooses revenge, the other chooses redemption. One chooses to repeat the pain they went through, the other chooses to end the cycle. You were the second, and that's what makes them uncomfortable. They say they want peace, but they feed their soul drama. They say they want love, but they carry knives in every interaction. They say they want truth, but they lie to themselves every day. You didn't do any of that. You let pain strip you down, tear you open, and rebuild you with cleaner hands. You let the pain educate you on who you are and what you will never become. And that kind of clarity, that kind of emotional intelligence, it terrifies people who are still blaming the world for the wounds they refuse to heal. Your scars are your credentials. Their bitterness is their ceiling. They're not confused by your success. They're ashamed they didn't grow through their own pain the way you did. They're haunted by how you managed to stay soft in a world that tried to turn you hard. They're replaying their own trauma like a broken record while you turned yours into a symphony, a new rhythm, a deeper resonance. You became whole while they became hollow. And that's why they study you. That's why they stalk your page. That's why they whisper your name like it's a plot twist. Because deep down, they know. They had the same storms, but they chose a different path. You walked through hell and came back with heaven in your chest. They walked through the same fire and chose to become ash. Now imagine this. You're standing in a room full of people who once pitied you, misunderstood you, even mocked you. But now they can't look away. They can't stop watching, because the one they thought was too soft to survive is the only one who came out with peace, purpose, and power. That's not just confusing to them, it's threatening. They expected you to be angry. They expected you to get even. They expected you to spiral like them, but you didn't. You rose, quietly, consistently, authentically, and now your presence makes noise without a word. So let them study, let them stare, let them Google healing like it's a shortcut they can buy. They'll never understand the process because they were too busy running from the very thing that shaped you. You didn't escape the pain. You let it evolve you. That's why they're watching. That's why they're confused. That's why they'll never replicate you. Because while they picked at their wounds looking for sympathy, you turned your wounds into wisdom, and now you walk like someone who's been through war and came back carrying peace. And that, chosen one, is what truly makes them uncomfortable. Not your glow, not your strength, not even your success. It's the fact that you didn't let pain ruin you. You let it refine you. Number 1. You went quiet because timing was sacred, not because you had nothing to say. They thought your silence was weakness. Turns out it was weaponized wisdom waiting to detonate. They said you disappeared. No updates, no stories, no loud declarations. And in their shallow minds, silence equals failure. But the truth? You were in a deep season of becoming, of realignment so powerful. Even you didn't fully recognize who you were turning into. And you couldn't explain it, because how do you explain a transformation still under construction? Imagine this, chosen one. A seed buried underground doesn't look impressive to the eye. It looks gone, forgotten, covered in dirt. But below the surface, something sacred is happening. Roots are forming, strength is growing, the foundation is being built where no one can see it. And when it breaks the ground, that's not sudden. That's timing, that's precision, that's purpose unfolding right on schedule. You weren't missing, you were maturing. You weren't irrelevant, you were evolving. You weren't passive, you were preparing. Every moment you stayed quiet was a moment the universe was rewiring your spirit, upgrading your perception, detoxing your path. While they were busy posting every half-baked move for attention, you were in the lab, building something real. They thought silence meant stuck, but silence was your sanctuary. It was where you learned to hear yourself again. It's where you shed what didn't serve you and found what actually did. And when you re-emerged, clear, calm, calculated, they were caught off guard because your process didn't match their expectations. Your silence wasn't absence, it was sacred alignment, moving in a realm they couldn't reach. They don't understand how you're glowing now, how you're walking in rooms with peace, confidence, and a presence that wasn't there before. It's because while they rushed for claps, you waited for confirmation. They moved for approval, you moved for alignment. And now they're scrambling, whispering, replaying. How did they do it? The answer: privately, patiently, powerfully. You didn't skip steps. You just didn't parade your pain. You didn't decorate your breakdowns for sympathy. You chose depth over display. And now that your season has arrived, your silence is echoing louder than their noise ever did. They thought you were fading, but really, you were becoming unstoppable. Number 1, you didn't pull it off. You survived what was meant to break you. They talk about your glow, but they didn't see the grit. They see the win, but they missed the war. People keep staring at your results like it was some kind of miracle play. They assume you figured out a cheat code, that you must have had a lucky break. But here's the raw truth. You didn't pull it off. You outlasted what was meant to kill you. What they call a win is really a survival story dressed in peace. Imagine this, chosen one. You weren't climbing the ladder of success. You were clawing your way out of quicksand while smiling like nothing was wrong. You didn't have the luxury of shortcuts. There was no mentor holding your hand, no safety net catching your fall. You made it through betrayal, abandonment, doubt, and confusion, and you did it without applause, without rescue, without backup. They want the formula, but there is no formula for what you did. You endured, that's it. You sat in your darkest nights and talked yourself out of giving up. You carried disappointment like a backpack and still kept walking. You stayed kind, even when you had every reason to become bitter. And while others were looking for an elevator to the top, you built your staircase out of heartbreak. They thought it was strategy, it was survival. They thought it was luck, it was loyalty to yourself. People keep asking, how did you do it? But what they're really asking is, how did you not give up when it looked hopeless? And the truth is, sometimes you almost did. There were nights you collapsed, mornings you dragged your spirit out of bed with nothing but fumes and faith. You weren't certain, it just hurt too much to stay the same. They don't see the internal bleeding, the silent screaming, the days you performed in public while privately unraveling. They think your peace is pretty, but your peace was purchased with pain they could never afford. And your glow. That glow was lit with the fire of everything you survived. This isn't about pulling off a plan. This is about refusing to die in your wilderness. And now you walk with a quiet power, a presence that can't be faked, because they still don't get it. The victory is not what you gained. The victory is that you didn't lose yourself getting there. Number 1, you didn't beg for access. You became the frequency that opened the door. You stopped asking for a seat at the table, and suddenly the whole building shifted in your direction. They still don't get it. They're watching you walk through doors they swore were locked, wondering who handed you the key. But the truth? No one gave you anything. You didn't force your way in. You didn't sell your soul or shrink your spirit. You aligned, and that alignment opened what approval never could. Imagine this, chosen one. You used to bend yourself just to be digestible, smiling when you were hurting, nodding when you should have roared, shrinking just to make others feel comfortable. You gave the best of you to people who didn't even have the capacity to recognize your value. You tried to earn the love of people who couldn't even like themselves, and you thought the only way forward was to be liked. But something snapped. You got tired of explaining your worth, tired of auditioning for roles you were born to lead, tired of making yourself smaller in rooms that couldn't even contain your light. And when you stopped chasing their yes, you found the universe was just waiting for you to remember who you are. Approval builds cages, alignment breaks chains. They don't understand why your life suddenly looks different, why things seem to flow now, but they weren't there when you stopped chasing validation and chose vibration, when you stopped performing for attention and started embodying truth. That's when the shift came. Not because you changed who you were, but because you stopped hiding who you are. While they were busy playing to the crowd, you were sinking with something deeper. You weren't waiting to be picked. You picked yourself. You stopped watering dead gardens and started planting in sacred soil. And now, everything you touch blooms, and they're scrambling to figure out why. They're addicted to applause. You became aligned with assignment. That's the real glow-up. You didn't get access because you were loud. You got access because you were clear. You became magnetic the moment you stopped chasing people who never had the eyes to see you. And now, they're still out there auditioning. You already signed the contract with your purpose, with your peace, with your power. They don't understand it because it wasn't performance. It was presence. It wasn't man-made. It was universal. And that's the difference they'll never be able to decode. Number 1, they mocked your spirit, but you were playing a game. They never studied. They laughed at your silence because they couldn't hear what the universe was telling you. While they were busy faking success, you were learning the real mechanics of it, not through noise, not through gimmicks, but through sacred alignment. They thought you were soft, lost, too spiritual, too trusting. But now they're choking on their own ego because everything you knew in your spirit is now showing up in your reality. Imagine this, chosen one. While they were chasing status, you were mastering stillness. While they were obsessed with being seen, you were learning how to see. You studied the current behind the current. You didn't just want results. You wanted resonance. You understood something they'll never grasp. That energy is the real currency, and alignment is the only real leverage. They calculated, you calibrated, they built networks, you built a vibration, they bragged, you listened, they forced, you flowed. And now they look at your rise and call it luck when it's really law, spiritual law, the law of intention, the law of cause and effect, the law of authenticity, the law of alignment. You didn't hustle to be seen, you aligned to be selected. They were shouting for power. You whispered with the universe, and it moved mountains. They don't understand how you're not burnt out, how you're glowing when they're exhausted, how you're moving forward without cutting corners or playing dirty. It's because you never played their game. You mastered a higher one, the kind that doesn't show results instantly but guarantees they last. You trusted timing over tactics, vision over vanity, and now they're scrambling in confusion because their shortcuts are finally catching up to them. And your stillness is catching momentum. They mocked you when you meditated instead of manipulated. They laughed when you chose rest over hustle. They dismissed your discernment as delay. But now they're staring at your life like, wait, how did that happen? It happened because you surrendered when they forced. It happened because you understood that what's spiritual can't be staged. And now the universe is answering the patience they never had. You're winning because you didn't try to fake being chosen. You lived like you already were. Let them be confused. Let them whisper. Let them mimic. They can copy your style, but they can't access your source, because what you carry can't be replicated. It was revealed, and revelation isn't taught. It's earned through endurance and activated through obedience. Number 1, they're not threatened by you. They're terrified of what you reveal about them. You didn't expose them with your words. You exposed them by existing without needing to lie. They're spiraling right now, and not because you did anything to them. You didn't shade them, you didn't drag them, you didn't even speak their name. You just kept it real. You healed out loud. You grew in front of the same people who thought they had you figured out. And that's what's got them panicking, because you didn't just win. You proved you could win without selling your soul to do it. Imagine this, chosen one. Someone spends years building a house of mirrors, carefully placed lights, curated angles, performance friendships, and surface-level smiles. It all looks impressive from the outside. But then you walk in, no props, no disguise, no game face, just you, real, raw, aligned. And the whole illusion starts cracking just because your truth showed up in the room. Your success didn't expose them. Their reaction to it did. They built a life on false foundations. What looks good, what sounds powerful, what trends well. But your quiet confidence, your grounded presence, your peace that doesn't scream for attention, it disrupts them. Not because you're attacking, but because you're revealing. Your existence is proof that it was never about followers, filters, or faking it. You didn't beat them at their game. You exposed that the game itself is a lie. They're not mad because you hurt them. They're mad because you didn't have to play dirty to win. You didn't gossip to gain access. You didn't compete for crumbs. You didn't wear masks to feel seen. You showed up in your truth. And that alone burned through their facade like fire through paper. They performed success. You embodied healing. That's what broke them. Now they're scrambling. They whisper, oh, they just got lucky. They search for cracks in your shine. They call your peace fake because theirs is performative. But deep down, they know you're the real thing. And nothing is more humiliating than realizing someone got further than you with less manipulation and more integrity. What they can't admit is this: they want what you have, not your shoes, not your clout, your peace, your clarity, your wholeness, but they can't fake their way to it, because your kind of success comes with healing. And healing requires honesty. That's the part they still run from. You didn't just rise. You became the mirror. And now they can't look away because you showed them exactly what they could have been if they didn't betray themselves. Now that's why they're really shook. Number 1, you didn't beat them. You survived what they prayed would break you. They threw stones to bury you, but you built a throne with every single one. They thought they ended you, quietly, strategically, without even having to say your name. Gossip was their weapon, rejection was their ritual, silent sabotage was their sport. But you didn't fold, you didn't flinch, you didn't even respond. You outlasted them, and that's the part they can't swallow. Because in their minds, you were supposed to disappear. Imagine this, chosen one. They lit fires behind closed doors, hoping the smoke would suffocate your future. But instead, you learned how to breathe in chaos. You didn't get ahead by shouting louder or showing off. You got ahead by learning how to walk through the heat with grace. They didn't expect that. They expected you to break, to beg, to fade. But you didn't. You built. You didn't rise by being stronger. You rose because their weapons couldn't reach your roots. They watched you get betrayed and assumed you'd bleed out. They celebrated your silence, thinking it meant surrender. They smiled in your face, all while twisting the knife deeper. But what they didn't know is that you weren't driven by ego. You were driven by destiny. You weren't seeking revenge. You were answering a calling. While they were plotting your collapse, life was shaping your resilience. Every betrayal became another layer of armor. Every rejection, another compass toward your real path. And now that you're standing here, whole, healed, unbothered, they're spiraling because they know what they did. And they can't figure out how someone they tried so hard to break is still shining with this kind of peace. You didn't outperform them in numbers or noise. You outgrew their tactics. You walked through every emotional ambush and still found yourself. That's terrifying to people who rely on cruelty to maintain power, because it means the one they tried to destroy is now untouchable. They played dirty. You played long, and you're still here. That alone is the victory. Now they're stuck, watching you thrive while choking on the consequences of their own character. And the most painful part for them? You never retaliated. You just survived. With grace, with growth, with silence that screamed, "I'm still here." That's what they can't fake. That's what they can't stop watching. And that's why they're losing sleep. Not because you won, but because they lost, even with all their weapons drawn. Number 1, you're not confusing. You're unprogrammable, and that's what scares them. They can't control what they can't predict, and you've become the storm that refuses to follow their forecast. You broke the algorithm, the one they use on everyone, the push-pull, the breadcrumb, the emotional baiting. They tried it on you and nothing happened. No reaction, no breakdown, no desperate messages, no vague status updates begging for attention, just silence, power, presence. You didn't play along, and now they're stuck wondering how you slipped through the cracks of a game they thought they mastered. Imagine this, chosen one. They had a playbook. They've used it for years. Trigger this, say that, ghost them here, compliment them there. People bend, people break, people come crawling, but not you. You became unreadable. You became unreachable. And it shook them because you were supposed to follow the script. Instead, you rewrote your entire story. You didn't ghost them back. You elevated in silence, and that silence spoke louder than revenge ever could. They studied your patterns looking for weaknesses. They prodded your insecurities, hoping for reactions. But you evolved out of the loop they depend on. You don't seek closure from chaos. You don't entertain clowns when you've outgrown the circus. You're not predictable, not because you're erratic, but because you're healed. You no longer move from wounds. You move from wisdom. You don't need noise to be seen. You don't need chaos to feel alive. That's why they can't figure you out. You don't chase what walks away. You don't perform for approval. You don't play emotional chess with people who never respected the board in the first place. While they were busy crafting strategies to bait you, you were building a mind they couldn't hack, a soul they couldn't shake, a calm they couldn't counterfeit. You didn't just escape their algorithm, you broke their illusion of control. Now they're spiraling, not because you hurt them, but because they can't predict you. And when people can't predict you, they can't manipulate you. That's the part eating them alive. You became a glitch in their system, an error in their expectations. And the moment they realized their tricks no longer worked on you, they had to face something even scarier than your silence. The truth that they never had power in the first place. You don't owe them energy. You don't owe them explanation. You owe yourself peace. And peace, chosen one, is the greatest rebellion of all. Number 1. You didn't just succeed. You escaped what was killing your soul in disguise. You weren't saved by luck. You were saved by letting go of what everyone else was still dying to keep. They don't talk about this part. They talk about your glow, your wins, your rise, but they never stop to ask what you left behind to get here, because if they did, they'd realize this wasn't a glow-up, it was an exodus. Not from failure, but from emotional slavery. You didn't just walk away from pain, you walked away from people who wore love like a mask, but handed you poison underneath. Imagine this, chosen one, waking up one day and realizing the prison you're in doesn't have bars. It has birthday cards, shared DNA. We've always done it this way. It's being bled dry by emotional obligations, suffocated by outdated loyalty, trapped in rituals of pain disguised as tradition. Most people never leave. They stay in those cages because guilt feels safer than growth. But you ran. You left everything that was rotting your soul, even when it had your last name on it. You didn't pull it off because you were stronger. You pulled it off because you chose your soul over their comfort. They call you cold, distant, changed. But that's because they were feeding on your silence, your tolerance, your identity. And when you cut that off, you exposed their dependency on your pain. You were the emotional anchor they used to keep the dysfunction alive. But the day you said no more was the day you became the one thing they feared the most, a cycle breaker. You didn't walk away from love. You walked away from versions of love that required you to abandon yourself. You walked away from people who said, "But we're family," while refusing to do the bare minimum of healing. You walked away from comfort that came with a cost, and that cost was you. Now they look at your peace and call it rebellion. But what it really is reclamation. You reclaimed your mind, your time, your future. You stopped playing the role. You stopped absorbing generational shame. And you rewrote the script that everyone else was too afraid to question. They're still loyal to the cage. You flew out of it. That's why they don't get it. You didn't just win, you escaped. You didn't just heal, you redefined the meaning of home. You broke the chain. You ended the performance. You sacrificed their approval for your authenticity. And now, you walk free while they're still clinging to the illusion. You didn't betray them. You rescued yourself. That's the part they'll never understand, and that's why you'll never go back. Number 1. You didn't win their game. You rewrote reality and built a kingdom from scratch. They were playing for trophies you never cared to win because you were too busy building a throne they never saw coming. They don't understand it, and they never will. You didn't beat them at their own game. You rejected the game entirely. While they were scrambling for relevance, likes, shares, reposts, clout, you were crafting something sacred in silence, something rooted, something timeless, something real. They were busy polishing masks. You were healing wounds. They were racing each other for spotlight space. You were laying bricks, one truth at a time, building a kingdom in the dark. Imagine this, chosen one. While they ran in circles, desperate for applause from crowds that forget them tomorrow, you were designing a future that doesn't collapse when the noise dies. You never wanted their stage. You wanted substance, and that made you dangerous, because while they were addicted to the algorithm, you were in alignment with something deeper, something no click, comment, or trend could imitate. They were chasing image, you were building identity. That's why you're still standing while they're still spinning. They thought you were losing because you weren't loud, because you weren't performing, because you weren't playing into the fake rituals of attention seeking. But what they didn't see was that your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. While they recycled the same lies with different filters, you were mastering the one thing they never dared to touch: truth. You weren't chasing fame. You were chasing freedom. You weren't trying to impress strangers. You were learning how to live without pretending. And that kind of power, it doesn't broadcast, it becomes. Now, the system they swore would carry them to the top is collapsing, and they're panicking. Because the numbers don't save them. The brand doesn't hold up. The noise doesn't heal. They built their empire on sand. You were pouring your pain into purpose. You were writing chapters they never bothered to read. You weren't just building a business, a brand, or a platform. You were building a kingdom, not to rule over people, but to finally rule over yourself. They performed for the crowd. You prepared for the storm. And now that it's here, you're unshaken. That's why they can't trace your blueprint. It was never meant to be copied. It was meant to be carved from truth. While they chase illusions, you live in your own world now. Not because you escaped reality, but because you built a better one. And now, they're exhausted, confused, and burning out in a game you stopped playing a long time ago. And now you know the truth. They're not watching you because they admire your strategy. They're watching because they've realized your strategy was survival, your success was forged in fire, and your glow was born from battles they've never had the courage to fight. You didn't go viral, you went vertical. You didn't follow a plan, you followed purpose. That's why they're stuck studying your steps while you're walking in a realm they'll never reach. Let them wonder. Let them mimic. Let them try to decode a frequency that was never meant for them. Because you didn't come this far to explain, you came to embody. If this message hit deep, like it, subscribe to stay locked in, and drop the number 777 in the comments if you know you've been misunderstood because of what you carry, and share this with someone else who's walking through fire to build something real. We rise, chosen one, because we were never meant to blend in. We were built to become.